Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another ttff20 industry event. We're so happy to have you here. This year, our full film program will be screened online from September 9th to 15th with our new media exhibition installed at Medulla Art Gallery in Woodbrook, Port of Spain. Now, don't forget, you can check out our full film listing and pay for film bundles at online.ttfilmfestival.com. And if you're joining us via Facebook Live, please feel free to pose all your questions in the comments section below, and we're going to get to that during the presentation. We'd also like to thank all our ttff20 sponsors and partners. ttff20 is given leading sponsorship by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, with contributing sponsorship by Republic Bank Limited and Shell Trinidad and Tobago Limited supporting our online industry events. So it is my great pleasure to introduce today Patricia Martin from Habanero Film Sales in Brazil. Patricia has more than 25 years of experience in the industry, from film festival programming to film distribution. She's also a visiting professor at Cuba's International Film School, and we're very pleased to have her here with us today to talk about the wonderful world of film distribution. So welcome, Patricia. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks so much. And it's really nice to know that despite all the difficulties and hardships that we are going through all over the world, there are people working hard to bring us together. So for me, it's an honor to join you here at this online industry event. And well, I hope you find this interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start. It's a go. So basically, we're going to be addressing today some of the basics of how filmmakers, independent filmmakers, should start getting ready for festivals and distributions. And if there is a positive thing this pandemic taught us, and this is not something restricted to the film biz, it's that nobody really knows nowadays what the future of this industry is going to be. Really, what this gives us is a little more freedom to making some experiments and taking some risks. So how do we go in this line? First of all, before we start thinking about how to distribute or how to go through the festival line of our films, we should consider the context of the film and the industry we are going through. So in regards of context, we have two aspects. First, the global business trends, and then some aspects that are completely related to the local film industry, to the region where we are operating. So let's go first to the global business trends. So what's going on in the film business today? There's going on a lot. What I did here is I selected a couple of magazine articles. I'm not going through them. It's just for you to check the headlines and get the spirit of how things are being perceived. This is an article from Variety where director Oren Moverman talks about the future of movies, and he says something like, independent cinema as we know it, it's over. So it's not a very optimistic headline, but he mentions the fact that the pandemic sort of accelerated a trend, but this was a revolution that has been going on for a long time. Here we have a second one. This is from the New York Times. It means it's not an industry publication. It's like a mainstream media. And here it says, "The week-old Hollywood finally actually died." And it's an interesting article because it goes through the history and how streaming services that now are in charge took over many of the big media companies like Warner, for example. And they are bringing together a different corporate culture, a completely different thing that has nothing to do with Hollywood as we knew it. There's another article that maybe some of you already heard about, and it was how Universal and AMC is the biggest theater chain in the United States, reached an historical deal shortening theatrical exhibition window from 3 months to 3 weeks. That was like a huge, huge thing. What is this window from 3 months to 3? We are going to see that along the presentation, but basically it means that before a film goes to VOD, it's only going to be 3 weeks. Before they had to wait 3 months. Another article, this one is from The Guardian, also a mainstream publication, not an industry publication. I was mentioning something about that Sundance Sunset. As many of you know, Sundance is known to be the mecca of indie filmmaking, the place where these small movies would suddenly be discovered and from there reach the world and get huge distribution deals, etc. This picture actually is from a very interesting film called The Farewell that you all may know. What happened this year in Sundance? And this is before the pandemic really hit. And what happened was that the biggest buzz during Sundance 2020 was when Taylor Swift came with her documentary Vis Americana, and that was like the biggest buzz. And that film, that documentary, played on Netflix only 2 weeks after being in Sundance. So it's hardly the same thing as the idea of having this little, unknown film from a known filmmaker just exploding in Sundance. It was a completely different deal and a completely different industry, what was revealed in this fact. So basically, this in a sense and in many different aspects showed us that we are in the middle of a totally fractured, mutating, moving landscape. And in many different ways, this distribution system is broken. And when I say broken and I say mutating and fracture, I'm not meaning the industries of small countries where things have been hard since the beginning, always. I'm talking about Hollywood and from Hollywood down. So it's getting hard, complicated, and different for everyone. So, as Owen said in that article, the pandemic has exacerbated a trend that was already pushing studio blockbusters towards the big screen and everything else towards the small screen. So we are, in a way, everything else, as you can imagine. So what's going on in the small screen? In the small screen, already is dominated by these streaming giants, Netflix, Disney, Amazon, Apple. So there's a lot of consolidation in here too. And in parallel, that's not exactly in the movie business, but it's in the media business. We are living in a post-truth era in which the perception of the world is sort of mediated, if not dominated, by all these algorithms that you know about. So this goes in parallel to an increasing trend toward government control of mass media. We see this in countries such as China, Russia, Cuba, Turkey, Hungary. So it's a complicated time in many, many different ways. How is the impact on film fests? Film fest slates programming actually should be sort of navigation charts about what's going on in aesthetic trends, topics, things, all the vanguard thing about filmmaking. And actually they should serve audiences more than film fests themselves. What I mean by this, I mean, if you know your audience and know there's no way two audiences are the same, there should be a particular lineup. Each film festival should be a particular lineup for its own audience. So focus should be on creation, right? But in many cases, that's not what's going on. And many, many festivals sort of reproduce the logic of commercial exhibition, not because they are programming commercial films, but the logic of commercial exhibition is that they program what they know for sure is going to be a right bet because they had either many awards, they had been like sort of ratified by big programmers of big film festivals because they have celebrities and actors and actresses well known. And so in that sense, I mean that some festivals are sort of reproducing commercial exhibition logic instead of doing actual creation. So that is like an overview. We are going back to this afterwards. But now let's get into this other context. So we were up here, so now we are going to the local scene. From the cultural and geopolitical point of view, the notion of Caribbean is a very complex one. It's reflected into a multi-language, diversified industry in itself, different industries and not one Caribbean industry, of course. And yes, here we know there are only in the insular region of the Caribbean, you have like 13 independent countries, you have 19 other countries that are not really sovereign independent states. And then you have countries like Trinidad and Tobago, that it's one country, two islands. And then you have an island that has one island, two countries, like the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And then you have islands that belong to, they are part of the European Union, like Martinique and Guadeloupe. And so it's a very complex landscape. And then you probably must be thinking by now, why is this woman getting into this Wikipedia mode and talking about things that probably you, of course, know much more than I do about? And the reason for that has to do with distribution, and it has to do with contracts. Contracts are about territories, contracts are about windowing, and contracts mention and must consider holdbacks. Again, you probably by now think, okay, I've heard those notions, those topics, those words, but they don't really mean nothing to me, but I don't worry about because my sales agent or my distributor will take care of that eventually when distribution comes. I'm on a different stage, concerns about filmmaking, etc. But the whole point of this presentation, and if there's a takeaway I would like you to have, is that those things have to do with you, and the early you address them, the better. So filmmakers definitely should have a basic understanding of how distribution works by the time you start negotiating financing. Before you give away territories and you give away windows in pre-sales and co-production agreements. Why? Because if you don't check that right, you can get into overlaps. And if you do it right, that will help you to reach wider audiences and to maximize returns. That has to do, I will give you a couple of examples for you to know what I mean. For example, we mentioned all these islands and different geopolitical issues regarding the very complex landscape of Caribbean industry. Let's say, for example, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an island, Spanish-speaking Caribbean, but from the point of view of contracts, from the point of view of the business, of distribution, Puerto Rico is the territory of the United States. And I don't want all my friends in Puerto Rico to try to hang me for saying that, but it has nothing to do with politics or ideology. It has to do with business. When you sell the territory of the United States, you sell a film to the United States, you are selling Puerto Rico too. So if you decide, for example, to engage into a non-theatrical or some sort of limited theatrical distribution with Puerto Rico only, you can do so, but you have to be aware that in some way you are interfering with the window and another different territory. The same goes with, for example, all media that you are dealing with in Martinique. If someone buys a film for France, they are buying Martinique too. Of course, you can always negotiate, you can always deal, but what you cannot do, for example, is sell a film to France and then get into a smaller or maybe what you think a local deal with the French-speaking islands in the Caribbean, because you will have to let know your buyer that you are doing so, because actually Martinique is the European Union and is the territory of France. Same goes with Cuba. Cuba is an independent country, and of course, they have a very strong film industry in many sense, traditional. But because there is another geopolitical issue that the United States have an economic embargo with the island, producers in the island cannot directly sell a film or engage in any commercial deal with the United States because that's forbidden. They can do so if they have a third country co-producer or if they have a third country sales agent. So just string close. It's just for you to start having these topics resonating in you. If you have a sales agent, he will take care of that. But you need to know that before you arrive to the distribution phase, because that can interfere on prospective business you're going to want to make afterwards. So I'm talking a lot about windows. What is windowing? And what does it mean for hybrid distribution? And then maybe you want to know what is hybrid distribution. So here I go. Many filmmakers and producers are sort of anchored in an outdated notion of how distribution works and what's the actual role of sales agents and distributors. And this is completely understandable because the movie business has changed a lot and has changed very fast. So it's totally normal. People don't really get how much this changed. So let's see how things were in the old world of distribution. In the old world of distribution, filmmakers were focused just on the creative aspects of films. So basically, they were taking care of script, how's my vision about the film, all the artistic topics, the artistic side of it. And then when the film was done, the idea, the plan A, and actually the plan B and the plan C and all plans lead to the idea that you should try to get to a prestigious film festival. And from there, you would be able to secure a sales agent, and the sales agent would take care of distribution. And distribution in the head of many people was a very lucrative overall deal. I mean, to sell it to someone, to a big company, a big studio that had all the channels, and then would pay a high amount of money and get with the whole film for the whole territories and windows and take care of it. And then the filmmaker could go back and start concentrating himself in developing his next project. So if I show it in a sort of infographic, it would look like this. A producer would try to arrange some money to fund the film. The filmmaker was in creative control of the production, of making his film. Then the film was done. The film would then go to festivals. In festivals, it will sort of arrange someone to take care of the distribution. And from distribution, it would reach audiences. Actually, the money aspect, all this complex windowing and all this territory by territory, window by window process of distribution would happen only at this distribution stage, not before. Nobody necessarily had to take care of that or think about. Distribution in the old world, traditional world, looks like a one-way road. I mean, you start here and you would go till you arrive to the other end. While in the new world of distribution, or distribution 2.0, as Peter Broderick coined that expression, hybrid distribution, the perspective of distribution looked more like the second picture. I mean, there were several parallel ways of doing there. Eventually, you arrived to the same point, but the idea was a more diverse way. So what are the implications of this new paradigm? That is good to say that it's not so new now, and it's already been changed and affected by new paradigms. Basically, we can refer to the role of the producer or producer filmmakers, because in many small industries, it's the same person, basically, or a very small team. The idea is that the role, your work, is not finished when the film is finished. Like you saw in the beginning, in the first traditional picture, I mean, you finish the film, that was it. Then someone else would take care of business. But here in this new concept, in this new paradigm, that's not what happens. The producer, if he wants to eventually have some control on who gets to see your film, or if your film gets seen by someone eventually, you have to keep on working, keep being engaged. In the distribution timeline, in the old workflow, actually you saw it in the first graphic. First you'd fund, then you'd produce, then you'd promote, and only then the distribution phase started. While in this new workflow, how it works is you start promoting, you start letting people know, letting different players know there's a project, and this project is about this, and it has all these actors or these ideas going on. And then that promotion is what will help you fund and distribute your film. Why are you talking about distribute? Because many people get the funding by already making like a pre-sale or presenting their project first to a big streamer. Maybe they are interested, and then we fund it, and how's my film's gonna get done. So the distribute phase and the funding phase get together even before production starts. Then you go to production, and then you go back to distribution. So if you check these two columns, you will see that the timeline, the process, the workflow change dramatically. The role of film festivals also change. Film festivals belong to this industry ecosystem. And here I would like to note, because here many filmmakers erroneously think that festivals and distributions are separate worlds, art and industry, and they follow different logics. And first you deal with all these festival things without any concerns of the distribution of my film. And that's not the case once again. Actually, what's going on is that specialty and B-level fest circuit is taking the place of traditional theatrical distribution in many places. This is important to have in mind, because depending on how you play your festival cards, you can enhance or you can sabotage the prospective sales of your film. I'm not talking only about premieres. I'm talking about when and how you deal with this. And this leads me also to another thing, that is mass submissions that are so common now through these submission platforms that are so popular. Some people confuse this with a festival strategy. Okay, going to festivals basically is getting in a platform and submit to as many festivals as I can. That is not only expensive, because there are submission fees, as you all know, but it's counterproductive. It's not going to work for you, because you need to have a logic on this. You need to know that you can go to all festivals you want, even if that small festival made in some place where my friend is the director and wants to have my film. It's all about timing. You can go there if you already went somewhere else that requires a premiere status for your film. Premiere status can be from world premiere, if your festival has that leverage, or it can go to European premiere or a North American premiere or Caribbean premiere, etc. You can go all the way through that. What happens basically is if you start going to a festival, a second level festival, before you even attempt to go to another festival that requires a premiere, you won't be accepted to that. Maybe they don't want you anyway, that usually happens, but at least you gotta try, right? So there's a timing with all this. And festivals in the distribution business for sales agents are considered a window too. It's not like a parallel realm, alternative reality. It's not. It's part of the same ecosystem, and it's a window. We'll get back to this. So we go to the role of sales agents that has also changed from that first image we saw, where sales agents suddenly discover your film in a festival, would get it and then sell it all over the world. Actually, the sales agents get engaged in distribution sometimes before the film is completed. And they do so in, among other things, to make sure that all these windows and holdbacks and all these little geographical and timing and language questions don't get into the way of the prospective good sales he expects to seal afterwards, right? So you should see sales agents in a way of being advocates and also being protective shields for you as filmmakers and for your films too. Of course, I'm talking of reputable, good, serious sales agents, right? And what I mean about protective shields, because the industry became such a complex, such a difficult place to be around, where rules are not longer valid, and in some ways it's like the Far West out there, someone that knows his way around can sort of shield you from what? From bad deals, from scams, even from fake film festivals. There are, and yes, you can find stuff and get informed about that in many magazines. There are even fake film festivals. They do not exist. Films don't get shown to anyone. And you need to know that before you go out to the world. And of course, that is one of the objectives. The main idea, of course, is to monetize films and monetize in times and places where everybody seems to want free content, as it is now. There are so many platforms and places and people that basically want free content, including torrent aggregators. So one way to sort of try to monetize your way is with that. So one advice is do your research, ask around, and find your match, because not all sales agents are the same, and not all films should do well with the same sales agent. So we go back to the main question, that what is windowing? Because I've been repeating this and probably not all of you exactly know what I'm talking about. So windowing is a release strategy aimed to maximize revenue around content, okay? So a window is basically the time period during which a movie is made available in a particular form, meaning theatrical, in a movie theater, that's the theatrical window. TV, that's the TV window, that is called premium and free, etc., different windows. DVD at its time, and PV, which stands for pay-per-view. So at the beginning, when movies started, there was only one window, theatrical, of course. If you wanted to see a film, you had to go to a theater. There was no other way to do it. So windowing was easy. Then the second window, technologically speaking, that appeared was, of course, TV. And there was theatrical and TV. And from then on, that started changing drastically and rapidly. The technological change are changing this landscape as we speak. So now, September 11, I could probably say Windows have something to do with this list. Probably if you watch this presentation like 6 months from now, it's gonna change, actually changed so much since March until now. But what windows are we talking about? Basically, we could mention one was theatrical, the first one, then non-theatrical or semi-theatrical, and that we're starting to get into a gray area because nobody really agrees on what I'm talking about non-theatrical. Then you get pay TV, premium TV, that used to be called cable, but now it's not only cable, it's much more than that. And then free TV, that was like the broadcast television, open television. And then home video, which is also like a Jurassic Park word, right? Home video, who has a DVD at home, almost no one, but still it remains, at least for a couple of months. And then you got digital and mobile. I put it together and it looks like at the same size of importance as all the others, but actually this is like overrating the whole landscape. Digital and mobile is the window nowadays, right? And then we have educational, that at the beginning was like a sideline thing and is getting more and more structured. And it's a very, very interesting window, especially for documentaries and for independent films. Then we get these festival rights. Remember, we said the festivals were a window too. And then we get this ancillary realm that is also complicated now. So let's go really, really quickly through these ones. And I'm not getting into all the details because this is like getting ready for distribution presentation, not a real distribution workshop or anything, but for you to have the idea. Theatrical, of course, is everybody's, all filmmakers' dream and it's ideal, but it's no longer at the core of a distribution strategy. Why? Because it's so hard, it's so expensive. Actually, like we say here, only a small percentage of world film production get a full theatrical release. It depends on cost, it depends on the size, it depends of even if your country has any theaters standing. Many of them have became broke, so it's a complicated thing. For theatrical, the distributor acquires the rights of a whole territory. I mean, you buy theatrical rights for Spain or for Mexico or for the United Kingdom. Even if you are going to show it only in 2 or 3 cities, you had to acquire the rights for the whole territory. And that's one of the problems. That's why it makes it so expensive. Then we can go to free TV and pay TV, premium TV. Actually, pay TV, premium TV comes before free TV in this order. This is a major revenue source in the traditional distribution system. And is, if not the most, is one of the most lucrative window for Latin movies, for example. Pay TV, regional TV, it would cover all the Spanish speakings, and it's not only one country, it was the region. So it was one of the hot spots to be. And here is where also a sales agent is a must or advisable to have one. Why? Because contracts are very complex. They involve these holdbacks, E&O insurances, that is errors and omissions. It involves deliveries. So it's always good to have someone to make sure to at least advise you so you can know what you are getting into. And I'm mentioning this because some people goes to festivals and then, why? HBO wants my film, where do I sign? You just see the price and the money, and then you sign whatever they show you. Usually they are big, huge contracts. And then by the time you end up complying to all the delivery list, you are owing money instead of winning money, because there are so many things you don't have and you have to produce and you have to deliver that it's more costly to sell the film than not to sell it at all. And now it got more complicated also because most paid TVs have now their own on-demand streaming service. You can know that because you can get on your smart TV or your phone or your iPad all these apps in which you can see what is in premium TV on demand whenever you want and wherever you are. So actually the pay TV window already includes a VOD window too. So as you can imagine, that has lots of potential overlap and overspill issues, right? Okay, let's go on. Home video, completely overshadowed after the rise of VOD, of course, but still there is some niche thing going on direct sales. You can still go to Amazon, for example, and see that there are sometimes even used DVDs out there. There are collectors, and the same way that now we have Spotify, but still people buy vinyls, records, the same goes on for home video. And then we get digital distribution. And here I'm gonna go into this letter soup. I don't know if that's in English the same thing. We say sopa de letras, letter soup. Okay, so this mixed of things. We have VOD, we have basically PVOD that goes for premium VOD. You might have read about Mulan, right? That was released now first instead of going to theaters, it went to premium VOD. So you have to pay, I think it's $30 or something like that to watch it online for a period, it's a window. And then you have TVOD. TVOD, it's transactional VOD, and it stands as the model of iTunes, for example, or even video on demand. You would pay some definite amount of money to rent it or download it, download to own or rent it. SVOD is Netflix business models. You would pay a subscription, monthly subscription, to access a whole catalog of films. Either you watch one or you watch them all if you have time. Most of us have watched a lot during this pandemic. So then you get AVOD, advertising VOD. That is the model, for example, of premium YouTube and some other platforms that let you watch the film for free, but you have to watch advertising at the same time. And then you have BVOD, that stands for blockchain VOD. And that's something new, something interesting. It might go well. I still don't quite understand how it works, but it's interesting. And it has to do with blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is the same technology that is behind Bitcoin, but it's not the same. I mean, you can watch blockchain VOD, not necessarily paying with Bitcoins. That's what I mean. And FVOD stands for free VOD. That's the last one in this VOD windows or sub-windows. And of course, stands for free VOD. And then you get mobile. So in a week or two, there probably will be 2 more VOD windows because it's like increasing as we speak. But at the beginning, at least now, if I'm not wrong, and I might be, of course, this is more or less the VOD landscape. Then you get these non-theatrical, semi-theatrical, that are these famous bookings that you can book a film. This is more or less what happens around museums, cultural institutions, NGOs, embassies, corporations. What you have in mind when you do this are one-night community-oriented screenings. Then here you have all these do-it-yourself theatrical technologies, alternative distribution. You can get these inflatable screens put in the middle of a park, and then it's not inside a theater, but it's basically the same user experience as being in a theater. It's a community-oriented thing. The split here differs. Sometimes you get an arrangement with someone and you go 50-50 of the box office, or you can then go 50-50 and then bring the filmmaker and arrange some sort of workshop or a conference where he gets paid too. So this is something flexible, how you monetize this window. But the main thing you have to keep in mind is that this is a focus on live event theatrical. It can or not can have the filmmaker attendance in person. It can be via Zoom, via Skype nowadays, the hologram. I mean, it's going to change. It has changed a lot in this past 6 months. But basically, the idea is it's not only screening, it's a screening plus something else. And then we get educational. In many ways, educational is also overlapping the non-theatrical window. And here is universities, schools, libraries. And it started to change because in many libraries, the same way they have books, they have films. And how do you sell these rights? You sell them, for example, something called DSL, digital site license. I mean, the university makes available a film for curriculum development, for research, for professors and students to watch them as part of their class assignments. And here also, it's one of the niches of the DVDs in physical form, because sometimes libraries put DVDs as the same way they put books on shelves. But this is not the same DVD you sell for home video. I mean, you can have a home video DVD and buy it for $15, $10. But if you are buying it for institutional use, if a library is buying it, probably it's going to pay $300 and $400 because it's for a community use, for the use of many people, not home personal use. And there's also PPRs, public performance rights, that are when the school or the university makes a small event that cannot charge and not have exceed the amount of, let's say, that varies, but it could be 50 people. So that's another right. You can buy only a DCL or a DCL and PPR rights. This is getting interesting. There are distributors that work exclusively with this educational window. And then we get into the festival rights. And here we think of festivals as alternative distribution circuit. Of course, when I mean festival rights, I'm not thinking about Toronto or Venice, or those are still holding, they are like the paramount concept of festivals, where just to be part of their lineup, it gives you so much prestige and visibility that, of course, nobody dreams of charging them for selecting you. If you could pay, probably many people would pay, of course, that's not ethical. But the idea is different. I'm talking about these small events that are popping up everywhere that have the word film festival, but actually what's going on is an alternative theatrical circuit. What's the transaction you do around this? It's, of course, screening fees. You must have heard about that. People pay to get a license, a screening license, to show that film for an X number of times and venues. And here's an important thing. I'm going back to this contract thing that I mentioned that you have to deal with before you even get into production, because the rights or the decision making about Film Fest, they belong to the distributor if you license the film to a distributor, or to the co-producer if that got a territory in exchange of the money he input. I mean, this means that if you have a French co-producer, then French film festivals belong to him, whether he charges or not to show the film. And this is important also when we talk about holdbacks, because when you do this co-production agreement, even before you go into production, you acknowledge that he has the festival rights in that territory, as well as the distribution rights, and all that belongs to him. But he should first wait, have a holdback period, to let you, as a filmmaker, attempt to get into festivals that have, for example, world premiere requirements. Why? Because maybe he decides, the French co-producer, he decides to give the right to a small festival in France before you even try to go to Sundance. So if he shows it in a small festival in France, even if he has the right to do so before you try a bigger festival that requires a world premiere, then he is sort of blockading a larger priority that you have. But you have to state that in the contract, because if you don't have that in the co-production contract, he can do whatever he wants. It's just a matter of, being nice or not. This screening festival rights is another thing interesting to know. It's mostly 70% goes to the producer. I'm considering that the producer has a sales agent that will negotiate the right. So if you see it in perspective, probably the festival rights are from all windows the one where the producer actually gets the biggest cut. Bear that in mind, because many people, when they're talking about festival rights, think that's some money that goes to the sales agents, and that's not the case. Ancillary rights. Here's the realm of sequels, prequels, remakes, spin-off, closed circuits, airlines, hotels, cruise ships, military bases, oil rigs, games, apps, publications, soundtracks, merchandising, and everything else it gets into this. This whole goes with the rights, and sometimes they are specified who can do this and who cannot. And to have in mind, for example, airlines are well, now not, because airlines are having a hard time just surviving, making it around. But before all this pandemic went on and all airplanes were grounded in a way, the airlines' right was an interesting window to monetize films. It worked like a digital thing, right? And also, for example, you can specify on your contract or not that if your film does really well, whose rights are to be, who has the right to sell a sequel, for example. Okay, so this is like a really fast overview about this, but how this windowing system evolved from the overall deal that we mentioned, that all rights sold together to one distributor and he would deal with that worldwide. We had with that these fixed release plans. Okay, first we go theatrical for this period, and then from there we go there, and then we have the TV, and first in this country and then in these other territories, were very rigid release plans. And there was something, it's a complicated concept, but it's called cross-collateralized revenues. That means that maybe you didn't make so much money in the theatrical window, but then because you also had the TV window, you can either resell it to another TV network in your own territory. You bought the whole thing, and then monetize and cut some of the losses you made on the other window. That's how you cross-collateralized revenues and losses, of course. Then hybrid distribution came, and there was this more flexible release strategy. You could even split rights, separate revenue streams, and then you can sell this right, but then I will keep educational. Why? Because my film is an impact film, documentary that I want to distribute it on a community-based or grassroots concept. And if you sell it together with all the rights, maybe that will not get played well, or the film would not reach the kind of audiences I am personally and artistically committed to. So that sort of flexibility came with this digital, not necessarily digital, hybrid distribution concept. And then you get the day and date release, that is also a windowing system that emerged. And basically, what is day and date release? You probably heard about. It's a strategy, trying to make the best of the release window. So as this landscape of film became more and more complex and complicated, and things start overlapping one into the other, and then you first released in one country, and then you had not sold the next one, and by the time you sell it, the film was already in all torrent sites. And then basically, while it took so long to cover all your territories and window and bases and monetize them in the regular way, that when piracy came into the game, someone had to come with a sort of solution. That, of course, it was not a solution, but it's like something to try to manage this chaos. So date and date release was the idea of, I'm releasing this film everywhere the same day. That started, for example, you remember when Game of Thrones happened, in the last episode of Game of Thrones was aired on a day and date release everywhere in the world, no matter what time was something. I remember I was in Europe at that time, and I was watching it at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something like that. And they air it at the same exact day and date and time, just to try to go around the fact that the next day it will be everywhere in all sort of legal and illegal platforms. And people complied. Actually, people went into it to watch the 3 a.m. because nobody wanted the next day, like, to be in breakfast. Someone said, however, and just make a huge spoiler after 8 years watching Game of Thrones. So that was day and date release. So now we get into these holdbacks, another concept that I mentioned. And I will repeat, I said in the beginning, but you don't need to understand all this. It's complicated. I really sincerely doubt I do understand it well. But what you need to know is to have these concepts resonated in your mind, because you have to deal with it as soon as possible. And if you don't understand them, then get the advice of someone who does from the very beginning. Okay, this is something that you have to have around your mind since the conception of your film. So holdbacks basically means that licenses contain or should contain specific provisions requiring that the licensee should hold back the exploitation of a specific media until a particular time period has expired. That's what we mean, that the TV the VOD holdback of 3 months was the time period in which they, even if they had bought the VOD rights, they should not just exploit them or put it on your platform, to give time for the theatrical exhibitor to monetize that window. Because if you don't respect the holdback, then he hardly will get any profit of that window release. And this became like an issue. Everybody heard about this, because you might remember that since 1917, 19, and 19, there was a huge controversy going around Cannes and Netflix. Cannes programmed some Netflix films, and what happens was that some Netflix would not comply some rigid holdback regulations that the French exhibition industry has. So basically, Cannes end up banning Netflix films from competition because they wouldn't comply to that. So Cannes and Netflix, that clash, it was interesting, and I think it's iconic in a way, because it is dealing with the fact that we are nowadays trying to define what movies are in the era of streaming, in the streaming era, right? What is really a movie as opposed as something else? Or is a movie is defined by the way, with the place or the venue where it's going to be shown, or it's something that has to do with the creative concept, or it has to do with how it's going to be seen. It has to do with all those things. But in the age of digital disruption, we are dealing with the fact that we are defining along the way what actually a movie is, as opposed as this episodic sort of digital and non-digital content that we are getting more and more used to. So what was this Cannes holdback? Just for you, you can read it on the internet there's all the details and all the gossip around it and all the celebrities taking a stand about that. But basically, what was this holdback? According to French law, when you get a theatrical release, okay, in French cinemas, during the first year, only Canal Plus, that is a paid TV network that is paid with taxpayers' money, it's a French network, had during the first year, only them were allowed to sort of use that holdback or use the right to exploit that. On the second year, after 22 months, they were co-producing TV networks. On year 3, other TV networks. And SVOD, remember we mentioned that not Netflix is VOD, platforms were able to put that on that platform only 36 months after the theatrical release. As you can imagine, there's no way that Netflix is going to hold back 33 months. That's like forever in the movie release strategy, a film just to give all these holdbacks its own place. So what's going to happen with this? Nobody knows. This year, the festival did not happen, so probably next year this is going to be changed. But this is what happened and what is really behind that huge Cannes Film Festival Netflix controversy. Actually, it was a problem of holdbacks. This that I mentioned before is also a problem of holdbacks, okay? 3 months to 3 weeks. That was solved. How it was solved? Okay, they got into an agreement in which the theater chain would be able to compensate the eventual losses of cutting up this holdback or this window by getting a cut of the VOD revenues, just for you to know. So basically, the bottom line is that these transformations in the way content is produced and consumed has for sure disrupted all this traditional windowing model. And I'm talking too much, I'm seeing the clock here. But okay, I will try to speed up. But so in addition to these streaming giants that are consolidating the whole thing on their side, we have another problem. TV networks are also became streamers. We saw that. But then also producers and sales agents and distributors for the same, in the same way can be streamers. I mean, I can put my film on Video on Demand or on other platforms. Here in Latin America, we have another one called Movies, and you can sort of aggregate yourself, your film, and make it available for Video on Demand. And now, because of the pandemics, film festivals are streamers too, in a way. By streamer, I don't mean That's their business model. Obviously, it's not. But from the point of view of the audience, it's another streaming platform around there. It's another streaming platform available. So from the point of view of me, that I am the audience, today, what I can see online is whatever Netflix has, plus whatever Amazon Prime has, whatever is out there in free platforms. There are many, sponsored or not sponsored by institutions and governments and etc. And I can check out what's going on in Trinidad and Tobago Film Fest and what's going on in Toronto. And that for me, the whole available slate, no matter who is organizing it, right? So when is the right time to start budgeting and preparing yourself and your team for distribution? Obviously, as early as possible. Before you even start shooting, before you start talking business with finance people, with banks, with friends, with other corporate users. I mean, before you even start your crowdfunding campaign. And then when is the right time to start learning about distribution, how this works right now, okay? That you must start doing now, because I cannot emphasize enough that this is coming to you now. It's not something that's going to happen later. It's going to be affecting the way your film is done, and it's going to be seen. And if you don't understand about it, then someone obviously will take advantage of that. So deliverables. Sales agents, distributors, and digital outlets obviously expect more than just an HD master to release your film. So what do they expect? First, that varies, right? They will depend on the type of deal, but even your sales agent, in order to be able to work and promote and sell your film, will have his own delivery list. And he cannot do his work just with a Vimeo link of what you've done, obviously. So what I mean by delivery, I mean paperwork, legal documentation, all the movie information, trailers, the key art, the photograph, poster, obviously. The important thing to hear, the same as we mentioned with distribution, is that remember is that you have to stay organized from day one with everything. Deliverables are something, is in a way a work in progress. You're going to be updating and organizing and putting up together constantly, all the time. Basically, the film itself is like the main deliverable you have to produce. What I'm talking about, theater and festival screening version, I'm talking today still of physical and digital DCPs. Why? There are still some festivals that require a physical DCP. Of course, this is something it's going, away sooner. It's much more easier and less expensive to do with the digital, but also with progress. But there are still festivals. This week we had a big film festival that required that we send them a physical DCP. And then those have, of course, some quality requirements higher than if the way you are going to release it is a digital for online screening versions. Here, like the standard, of course, is full HD, depending on move on MP4, on H264. And here also it's important the bit rate. Ask around your people from post-production, the technical. The higher the bit rate, the higher the quality. Sometimes you may have a full HD, but at low bit rate, and it doesn't work the same. And then also it's important to have in mind, you have to have a clean file. A clean means with no subtitles at all. And then a subtitle version. If your original version of your film, the language spoken is English, then it's easier. But if it's not, then like the basic market version of your film must have English subtitles. Why I talk about clean? Because you can have a multi-language film where people speak in French, in Dutch, in Papiamento, I don't know. And then what do you do? You have a version that has the French and Dutch parts of the film with English subtitles. And what happens if I'm taking the film to a French film festival? You won't need the French subtitles, but you will need the ones of the English part and of the Dutch. And if you take it to Rotterdam, then you won't need the Dutch, but you need the French. So in order to deal with all these different circumstances and scenarios, you need to have one clean one. And then you have the SRT subtitles, and you may also consider that you don't have a subtitle, like for example, you're sending to a German film, and they will add a layer of German subtitles, but then they will do it over a clean version of your film. Then, of course, you need the private screener, preferably in Vimeo Pro. Why Vimeo Pro and not Vimeo Free? Because in Vimeo Pro, you will be able to know who watched it, for how long, where, and then you can do this monitoring and get this information, intelligence that you won't get on the free VOD that it's available with free Vimeo. Then, of course, if you can have the behind-the-scenes production video, the excerpts, the trailer, and then all the legal paperwork. You need the rights to the script, the music used in the soundtrack, the music license, plus the cue sheet, the chain of title, the permits, all contracts with sponsor, investors, EO, and insurance. And this is the important thing. You want to obtain all promises and licenses in writing during production. Don't wait till you finish your film. Things happen, people die, friends broke up, and then what was an agreement suddenly is not. And that can seriously jeopardize the future of your film if some of these little papers, even if it's very small participation of an actor, after the film is made, to cut that off is a huge, huge nightmare. So you want to avoid that. Don't trust or accept oral assurances. Then the film info, of course, you get the film credits, the short version, the full version, but then you need to produce the opening credits and the closing credits and the billing block, that is the one that goes in the poster. And this, why you should do this as soon as possible, because this has to be pre-approved by all producers, but all sponsors. They want to know whose logo appears before what size the logo, what's the right wording. And that's a lot of work too. So you have to keep in mind that before you are invited to a festival and you have a deadline like in half an hour. Okay, of course, so keep that in mind. Of course, all the technical aspects, all the logos, you want to have them high and low. The log line, the short synopsis, the long synopsis, the director's statement, the director bio, filmography, all this information that you know you need, but sometimes you don't get ready. And then, of course, after the film is done, you may have to work this again, give it another turn, because sometimes the synopsis you are using is the one you took to the working progress event before the film was even finished. And then when I read it and I see your film on the screen, they have nothing to do what you wanted to do with what is really on the screen. So this is something you have to redo and reorganize constantly. Subtitles, closed captions, there is a dialogue list that you need. A dialogue list is not a subtitle. Dialogue list is like your master document where it has basically 3 columns. You will have the time code. You have a second column with the name of the character that is saying what's going to be said, and then the dialogue, okay? From there, you make the spotting list, and from there, you will produce all necessary subtitles. Before this was really not an issue because some people don't even have subtitles, just a basic dialogue list. And if it got invited to a festival that require a particular language subtitle, probably the festival will produce it and people didn't have to worry about that. But now, because one of the main outlets are digital, distribution for films, and you see that in Netflix, films need to have, I don't know, sometimes 10, 12 subtitles list. You don't have to produce them or fund them all, but the more organized you have this, the better. Photos and stills, of course, you need a still man, and you wanna keep putting together all these production photos and making ofs and photos of filmmakers and crew, and you want to do this during production. Of course, you don't have a photograph, a good photograph, then you want to go to a studio and produce them afterwards. What happens? The actress already has 10 pounds more than she has when she was shooting the film. She has a different hairstyle. You don't want that. You want to do all that during production. The key art, of course, the poster, the key art, think it portrait, that is traditional poster layout, and the landscape, that is like the basic layout for streaming services. And you want a title treatment, that is the design of the title of your film. And this is very important when you want to do the branding, because then either for your social media or any promotion campaign, you just can use any photograph, any still, and then just put the title treatment on it, and then you have a branding piece of promotion material. And here's another mindset that you have to have in mind. When people think about a poster, usually they have in mind these big marquee, cinema marquee posters in this big size, and they design the art accordingly. But actually, the chances are that this poster will be used mostly by thumbnail size pieces on digital catalogs and in a small size. So what can look really great on a big poster in a marquee might look terrible or not make sense at all in a small dimension. So you either think two different layouts, or then if you have to invest in one, then think, make sure it looks good in a small size. Web and social media presence, that's a must. You have to get done that. Most important, when you see, remember when we were talking about the workflow, remember that promote was the first thing you had to do. So you don't create your Facebook page the day before the premiere into a big film festival. You want to do it before you start shooting. So by the time you premiere into festivals, you make sure you have a list of followers or fans or people where that news was going to resonate. Otherwise, what will happen is that you will put out there in a social media something that's going to be liked by you, your mom, and your cousin, okay? So you don't want to do that. You want to do that really early. And for this, there's this discoverability factor that it's very important too. Many people will find out that you or your film exists, not because you tell them to go to a specific page or to a specific website. They will find you in this related to algorithms that all these networks and the internet has. Looking for something else, they will find you. And you want to make yourself findable. That's a new logic, a new mindset. So this is very important to work and to work early. And then what else is part of your deliverables? Festivals and distribution docs. The first one is how you split your rights and your territories with your co-producers, with your sponsors, what you already gave away, so you make sure you don't sell afterwards. And then, of course, as soon as you start going through festivals, you get this festival control sheet, who accepted, where you won a big prize, and who rejected you. All this will work out to get yourself a control. If you have a sales agent, he will keep this booking for you. But if you don't, or even if you do, you want to keep the reports your sales agents will give you, because that's an important piece of delivery for your film. Okay? So, last, film festivals as alternative distribution platforms. This is something I mentioned before, and I will go really fast because I'm behind schedule. But this is really something that you should consider, because for many independents and art house films, Film Fest are nowadays indeed a relevant source of exhibition-related revenue for indies. Like I said, I'm not thinking that it's a matter of charging festivals just to show your film. It's not about this. It's about finding an equation in which you don't have to be pushed to make your film commercial or compromise some artistic vision, because if you make a great film and you make no compromises, and that film goes to some big festivals and get recognition, awards, and prestige, that he can go and be reprogrammed by several other second level and regional festivals and events, and they may pay a screening fee just to have the privilege of having your film in your program. So festival agreements are organized how many times these festivals are going to pass this film, for how long, what are the conditions, the deliverables they will require, what will give you. For example, you can ask to have the subtitles files given to you. That could be one, exchange that you can make with a festival, whether it's a competition or not, whether the filmmaker is invited. All that is specified on this festival agreement that the sales agent and the festival sign in order to make things clear. So here you can see there's this really interesting article in Filmmaker magazines that says, how much can your film make from festival screening fees? And this is really interesting, a really interesting article, because one thing that makes this distribution process so hard is there is not a lot of transparency going on between filmmakers and distributors and festivals. This is some sort of obscure thing. Probably you all know that, for example, Netflix doesn't, exhibit or show or make public how films are making within the platform as opposed as each other. So this is important because Filmmaker magazine, actually it wasn't Filmmaker magazine, it was the Film Collaborative. That is an interesting site that you want to check if you want information and learn about distribution. They made this research, and they tried to organize and ask around and found out that depending on what was the film festival or the premiere venue where a film was first released and how many niches that film belonged to, that affected the average revenue that film could make. And there's another information in this slide that I would like to know. this was published originally on December the 2nd, 2013. So this is something that has been going on for a while. This is nothing that has appeared or emerged with the pandemic or with online films, or this is something that has been getting structured long before. And here are the numbers. So you can see if a film, I'm talking about, of course, independent films in the States, but it can be applied a lot for everything. If a film premieres at Sundance, it can go somewhere between $13,000 and $70,000, an average of $32,000. If a film premiered in South for Southwest, it was a different subject, a different amount. If did not premiere at an A-level film festival, that of course was lower. Not because people would pay less, because it would not be requested as much. These are totals, okay? And here we go through the niches. If it's about social justice or human rights films, or environmental films, or LGBT films that are very particular structure exhibition circuits in themselves, then you can do even better, okay? So just keep this in mind, research, because this is something interesting. And like I said, you may not even make a big sale, but if you add up an interesting festival circuit run with some sales, a couple of them, maybe a platform. Remember that if you first sell to a big platform like Netflix, then they won't let you monetize other windows, but maybe a platform, an educational market, and then some airlines, and then you add up, and that's when I'm talking hybrid distribution. That's as opposed as the old model that was like one big sale and you gave away everything and then you didn't have any more to do with it, okay? So basically the job of sales agents nowadays is to try to make the best of all these different windows. And for sure, festivals are not something like completely strange to this. Is part of the same ecosystem. And thank you. I'm sorry it took me so long. Okay, Catherine?
Hello. Hi, Patricia. That was fantastic. I mean, you just gave us so much information and knowledge that is critical. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. That was fantastic.
Okay. I hope it was useful.
It was. It so was. And I do have a few questions from our audience and a couple myself that I'll pose to you. So let's go to our audience first. So Mariel would actually like to ask you, how does premiering in your home country affect the possibility of attending those tier 1 festivals?
First of all, hi, Mariel. And well, that's a really great question. Basically, your local film festival does not affect, it's not considered the international premiere of a film, even if the film is an international film festival, because that's your home, your homeland, that's your basic festival. But it will depend, of course, on usually the amount of visibility that we'll get. And of course, if that festival is not, has, for example, an online presence that it's gonna, I think something that's gonna stay even after we get out of this confinement phase. I think that online film festivals or even festivals, regular festival, will keep some online presence afterwards. If that not geolocalized, if that gets a coverage in, let's say, a big industry publication, like, for example, a Hollywood Reporter, and they detonate your film in there, then, of course, it's not because it's on the regulation, but you have to know you are jeopardizing the chances that Sundance Film Festival will try to, because they want this premiere. It's not only something, regulation-wise. It's something that talks about visibility, about reviews, about the surprise factor, the novelty factor. So that's something you will have to sort of calibrate, okay? How it works, how it doesn't work. Think also that you can participate to make sure outside the competition slate. That could be also a strategy. Have a special presentation.
Right.
That could be, then you are playing on the safe. But for sure, even if it's not like there specified, if you get into a festival in your own country and you win the top prize, and then you get 3 reviews in Variety, and then it's not, for example, Sundance is not going to consider it like a world premiere. Okay?
Interesting.
So keep that in mind.
Right. And then, of course, it would depend on where your home country is, I'm assuming.
Of course, that has to be also. Okay. So that's something that you have to calibrate. It's not like a yes or no definite answer. But in the bottom line is not supposed to be considered an international premiere.
Right. Understood. Okay, great. So, producers need to do their research in terms of and plan accordingly so that they know what the requirements are.
It's interesting to know that festivals also reposition themselves, along the time. So maybe one festival may not require this now because its importance now, this year, is not that. But they may get more prestige or maybe all the other festivals in my country disappeared, and then I am the festival. So I raise the requirements, and now I want to, that happened many years ago with Sundance. Sundance used to require international premieres, sometimes North American premiere, and now it's world premiere. Okay?
Right.
So that's not something that changed along the way too.
Right. Okay. So producers need to be aware of that. Great. And another question, what is your perspective on the various online submission portals like Film Freeway? What would you advise? Is there a best way to submit, for example, or not so?
Well, platforms came, the first one that appeared also, that was without a box. Was like the first
I remember.
That now does not exist anymore. And they came to solve a lot of problems. Before they came along, people would have to be sending screeners, physical screeners from here to there and mail them, and it was a very complicated thing. From the practical and technological point of view, platforms made things much, much easier, if not cheaper, because, still some festivals charge and you have to pay to submit their films. But they, of course, made things cheaper. But it made, easier. But it made it easier for you and for programmers too. Since these platforms appeared, programmers have seen the amount of films submitted to their festivals grow exponentially. And that is a logistic thing to bear in mind, because then you will need more people to go through all the films that were submitted. And that was not only a logistic problem, it created also some ethical things, because everybody knows that many festivals don't actually screen all films as sometimes they say. And then you get this other situation that then sales agents and these middlemen and these people with a lot of prestige and some people get, like a privileged access to programmers. They watch their films more easily and with more attention than when you are watching your film just out of a list of submitters. So what makes it easier makes it more complicated from a different perspective. It's like yin and yang. It has two sides of it.
Yeah, two
and
sides.
Like I said, what you have to bear in mind is that just to mass submit, that to checkpoint, to check, and then send your film to 100 festivals, that is not a festival strategy. That actually doesn't make sense. And that's going to get you, if not into trouble, you are going to sort of burn your chances, because not two films are made equal, not two festivals are made equal. And like I said, check around, and there's these fake film festivals actually going on. And there have been articles in Filmmaker and many magazines that they are called festivals. They are not, they don't actually exist anywhere. There are no screenings to anyone. They are like, but there are awards, and there's this really funny things that they are more awards than films competing or things like that. And it's a very strange scenario where actually it's a monetizing strategy for festivals and a way for many filmmakers, some of them are not aware of it, of thinking, okay, I won an award, and actually everybody else did too. But you don't know. But then what happens when I get my award? Okay, now you have to pay to get a trophy or things. This is a very funny
award.
Okay, it's very strange to it. But that happens, and that are things that are going on in this program. So if you're going to use them, and you should, because it's a very, practical way to do, please read the regulations before you submit. Make sure that festival makes sense for you. It's not cutting, or jeopardizing your chances to do something else. And that's like the basic, like read, know what you're talking about, and research.
Research again. The research is invaluable. You can never underestimate the value of it, because you want to be as prepared as you can and knowledgeable as you can as well.
I know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Patricia. And another few questions. How do you suggest film producers go about finding sales agents? What is the best way for? I know research is going to come into that as well, obviously.
Yes.
What advice can you give film producers?
With sales agents, there are all kinds of sales agents. There are huge, very, moguls sales agents, and there are small agents, boutique sales agents. And the first thing is to check what that sales agents, what's its library, what's its slate. Why? Because if your films have the same genre, the same size, more or less, it's the same kind of films that he is used to work with, then chances are he will have clients, a good networking, and he will be able to offer your film to people that have previously bought or dealt with films that look like yours. Okay?
Right.
If he is a sales agent that approaches you, and that can happen, and they say, okay, I would like to sell your film and represent your film, and then you go through the catalog, and he only has like horror films or I don't know, martial arts films, and your film has nothing to do with that, and probably you are either be misunderstood or taken by something you are not, or probably not do that well, okay?
Right.
That in terms of looking around. second big research you have to do, ask around. He may be selling the same kind of things, but he may be doing like lousy reports and having trouble with all sorts of clients. And sometimes producers don't have a good experience with them. So ask around. That's another important thing, that to make sure, that you are dealing with someone serious. Yes. And the third question, it's a matter of size. Is it always a big sales agent the best for your film? It depends. Sometimes big sales agents think maybe just, okay, this film I think is going to do great and I want it. Okay, they take it. Happens. It did not well. It did not happen what I thought it did. And if you are a big sales agent, by the next big market or festival, he will have at least 5 or 6 new films to promote. And then yours automatically will go, and disappear.
That's left behind.
Left behind, because those big agents have all these, big shot directors and people new and renewing the slate all the time. So maybe a smaller agent will have or will give your film a larger lifespan because he has a smaller library, or he does more this sort of little by little deals, and that's important maybe for small films. So again, research, find out, talk to people, try to see what's how they are doing. This is a big and a small world at the same time. Maybe.
It is. It's very much so. And sometimes there's just nothing like word of mouth, asking people what has their experience been like with this person. I mean, I always think word of mouth is so much better than what you can find online.
Of course. And if you trust the person you are talking to, then it's invaluable intel, I think.
Exactly. Even better. I agree. A couple more questions for you. When you were talking about the evolution of distribution, which first started with, that overall deal, and now then it went to hybrid distribution, you talked about flexible release strategies. And I wanted to ask you, what do you mean in terms of flexible? Because we know it's not flexible in terms of contracts. Those need to be ironclad, and you need to have all the contracts that you need. But flexible, could you describe what you meant by flexible a bit more?
Yes, by flexible, in this particular case of release strategy, I mean as opposed as these rigid holdback periods that were like, okay, you cannot go into TV until you have this theatrical period completely, and then you cannot go. That was like a very, one-way rigid okay, I'm not getting into that word in English, it's very long. But all this, specific period and regulations. Flexible means, for example, you can sell some windows or give your agent some windows and then retain some rights that you can handle yourself.
Right.
For example, you can sell theatrical and TV rights, but then you want to keep the educational. So you can keep doing some grassroots works. For example, this is one question, because I mentioned also that this consolidation that is going on with the big streamers are already cutting that flexibility too. Sometimes, okay, it's great if you can sell it to Netflix, but you must know that now Netflix, when it buys a film, to release it international on their platform, they won't let you do anything else with this.
With it.
Understand that. So, okay, you get, for example, 2 different films about immigration, for example. You get one film that those are called impact films because they are considered something that are supposed to impact people and make a change, right? Not just regular fiction, for example, or a thriller romance. This is specific niche film. And you may have a film that is considered a film that wants to influence decision makers, wants to raise awareness. Okay, so Netflix can be the platform. It's worldwide. Everybody will see it in subtitles in all different languages. So that could be the perfect venue to impact the world in this large audience, as large as possible. But what if you are making a different immigration film? You are making a film that is meant to empower this immigrant community to take things on themselves, to change their way, to educate, to move, to engage. So the first question is, do some immigrant camps, do they have Netflix? No, they don't, right? So some people don't even have, all the dogs in the neighborhood decided to bark today.
I was wondering if it's your dogs or my neighborhood dogs, but
no, these are not even my dogs. My dog is right here. It's the neighbor's dog, but they are Brazilian dogs, so they are loud. Sorry.
They just want to be part of the presentation. That's okay.
I know, but anyway. But then you'd be amazed to know how many people in the world don't have internet access nowadays. So if you are making this sort of tactical media kind of film, then you want to split your rights, to make a profit, but to get for yourself the right to do something with that, like to take it, put an inflatable screen and show it in an immigrant camp. You know what I mean?
Of course.
In a community base. So in order to do that, you have to specifically keep that in contract when you are signing and licensing other rights. If that is a network or that person is a TV network, they won't care. You can negotiate. What can happen? Someone may say, no, I don't want you to do that. But something you can talk. If it's not getting into the way of their business model, they will let you do that. But in order to for you to do that, you have to have that in contract.
Yes.
But that flexibility is something that came with this hybrid model. Before, as a producer, you actually had no way to get to reach the audience directly. Now technology lets you do that. There are do-it-yourself theatrical platforms. So before it was not even a problem. How are you going to rent a theater just to show it? No way. There was no digital film. There was no iPads. When this traditional model emerged, there was nothing like that. The only way to watch a film was in a theater.
Or TV.
So now, from different points of view, then since you can do so many creative things to reach your audience, then you want to make sure you can do that. And to do that, you have to have it in written. Before. I am clear or...
No, very. Yes, have it in writing so that it's clear to both you and all the parties involved what you are licensing and whatnot. No, that's very clear. And actually, Patricia, that leads me to my next question, because I was looking at all the different windows that you mentioned. Just in the ancillary windows section, there's so many outlets and platforms that there are just in that one section. So what I wanted to ask you is, from your experience, how quickly do you see the distribution landscape changing and evolving? And is one even able to predict what new windows will arise, what new windows will pop up? What do you think?
I think it's a very, very particular moment now, because before it was a clearer landscape for the big players. And
Right.
it was always hard for the small players. That was like the traditional way things are happening in the world, not only in the film business. But now the different landscape and what after this month of these really complicated times we are going through is that it's getting really difficult for everybody, for the small ones as usual, and then for the big ones too, because so many things got disrupted. Movie owners, movie theater owners are going crazy. Like I said, airline was a pretty profitable like window, but now, I mean, now it's non-existent. Who knows what's going to happen afterwards? Because for one reason, I've been reading that all this entertainment thing in airplanes are going to change. Because of course, they don't want people touching on screens. They don't want people talking. They don't want people eating. So probably we'll be flying on the plane, wings. Nobody knows. So it's gonna ever. Who knows? So how's that gonna play? Nobody really knows.
We don't know as yet.
Yes, but the thing is, it gets worse because there are so many people within the same industry with little knowledge of how the ecosystem works as a whole. So the same way we need a balance and an equilibrium in the environment, plants and animals, and they have to reach a balance point. Here, we either find a solution as a whole, the whole ecosystem, and that involves streamers, traditional distributors, sales agents, producers, and festivals, all one solution together, or we'll be playing against each other. And then maybe we all lose. So this is it's a time of opportunity too, in the sense that we are all equally lost. That's something good. Sometimes I was, more lost than most of people I knew, but now it's like we are equally, all of us lost together.
Yes, so, all in the same boat.
Yes, all in the same boat. But I think that probably the path to the future will come that we have to find, as an industry, a way to work together. 2 weeks ago, I watched a presentation that was called Radical Distribution. And the title was interesting and the takeaways were very interesting too. But one of the ideas that I got from it was that we have to find a way to collaborate and work together as opposed to all fighting for a small slot in the streaming platform. Because like producers need to invest in publicity, needs to invest in this. What if instead of all of us, each other, working 1 year, investing and hiring one people to do that for my film, we get together and try to sort of pull out something as a cooperative, as a collaborative effort.
Right.
And I think it's that way. Not sure it's going to work, but at least we have to hope that people will get into this mode that we cannot sabotage each other because we either survive as a whole or we'll sink all together.
Exactly, or we don't. I think that's a really great point. And I think we might just have time for one more question. Let me see here. I think you sort of spoke about this already, but I wanted to ask you, what is the best way or the best sources for a producer to keep up to date on the changing distribution landscape? And you had said that there's no way for a film producer to know it all. And this is why they have to work with sales agents and distributors who have that specialized knowledge and the experience. in their field. But can you speak to that a little bit in terms of if there are sources that you would recommend that a producer can use so that they can keep up to date and as knowledgeable as they can?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can do it yourself. You can embark into this do-it-yourself distribution. Of course, there are things that a sales agent will know out of experience, and that, of course, has a value. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist at all. And access is a very important thing. Because sales agents have access to programmers and access to distributors, and sometimes they get, to introduce things on a different way. Sometimes programmers or distributors have some sort of problem with getting like talking with producers themselves, because if they didn't like the film, they are in the situation of having to say something nice to someone. Did you watch my film? What you thought? And then I did, that kind of situation doesn't happen with the sales agents. They don't have to be nice to us. They just have to say, okay, I think that's not me. You can try this or not at all. There is a business relationship that, for obvious reasons, does not happen with the producer, because the producer, I once watched that, witnessed a situation that a programmer said something to a producer and he started crying right in front of the programmer. So these sort of things, imagine that. So that sort of more business thing, of course, happens with sales agents, but you could do. But you have to work for it. You have to learn, you have to think. The good thing is everything is out there. There are sort of workshops. You had a great workshop. I think it was yesterday, right?
Yesterday on contracts.
Yes, about contracts and things. So Sundance has a great platform now that it's called Collab.
Yes, I know that.
So you can start researching and learning and maybe taking little things. Some stuff, as we mentioned today, you have to read and have to get informed, because you cannot avoid it. Okay? Yes. But you can eventually do this do-it-yourself distribution if you have the time, or if your producer has the time to invest and to get educated on how things work. And maybe you just don't need a specific sales agent. You need a publicist. And you can get together a team of people that's just, like hiring someone for a specific thing, and then you get together, and then you get to be this sort of creative producer that sort of coordinates a team of professionals instead of giving what you do. But if you are not this kind of a really curious person that keeps updating himself all the time about new developments, and you are not good at networking, and you really don't have enough patience to organize all these festivals, control sheets and stuff, then you definitely should get someone to do that. Otherwise, you don't get the results.
Exactly. If you don't have the stamina for it and the patience, because it takes so much patience. Exactly.
It takes a lot.
A lot. Oh, great, Patricia. Well, thank you so much. I think we are just out of time. So I wanted to thank you for your time and all the work that you put into this today. I'm so excited to be speaking to you from Brazil, where you are as well.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be in Trinidad and Tobago, even if virtually. Festival.
Even if virtually.
It's been great. It's been great.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for sending in your questions. And I'd like to invite you all to our other industry events tomorrow on Saturday at 10:30 a.m. All these are Atlantic Standard Times, we have our first TTFF talk with the Academy Award-winning director Orlando von Einsendal. And at 1 p.m., we have our documentary filmmakers panel. All here on our Facebook page. They will all be Facebook Live videos. So please do tune in and continue to learn, and ask those questions. Thanks,
Great.
everyone. And thanks again, Patricia.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a great day.
You too.